It's far better to buy a wonderful property at a fair price than an ugly property at a wonderful price. This may seem slightly counterintuitive, but there are some very good reasons why you want to avoid buying properties solely based on a cheap price. Hi, my name is Koukun and I'm a real estate investor and I run a real estate team here in the Niagara region. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, check out our free beginner's guide to investing in the Niagara region in the comments below. Now, before we start, let's define what is an ugly property. Typically, these are the cheapest properties on the market. If you go on the MLS and do a search from lowest to highest price, these are the first properties that come up at the cheapest price. There is a reason, however, why they are cheap. Usually they're located in the roughest neighborhoods in smaller cities. This can typically be in the downtown area or in older neighborhoods, and the property is also usually older, commonly built before 1950, and it comes with quirks like uneven flooring, knob and tube wiring, and basically was built before the building code existed, so they don't really follow any clear standard. Now that we've defined what is an ugly property, what is a wonderful property? These are typically homes in the nicer neighborhoods. They don't have to be in the most expensive areas, especially if you're considering it as an investment, but it does have to be in a safe, family-friendly neighborhood. Typically, these homes will never be at a bargain price. The person selling the home knows that they have a great home and will demand a fair price. They will likely have taken good care of the property and have not let deferred maintenance build up. That is not to say that it won't be dated inside. I personally prefer when wonderful homes are unrenovated and it can sometimes be owned by a retiree who's lived in the property for the last 30 years and it's in mint condition but dated. Usually these homes are built after the 1950s, and I especially like the properties built after 1970. They usually come with high-end dry basement, floors that are even, and sometimes they come with upgrades you may not expect, like 1-inch water lines, waterproof basements, etc. Now here's why I feel so strongly about this. When I was purchasing one of my early rental properties in the city of St. Catharines, I had the choice between buying two properties, an ugly property at a cheap price and a wonderful property at a fair price. The ugly property was listed for $270,000. It was built in the 1940s. It was a small 2-story property that only had about 1,000 square feet above grade, but it had a 500 square foot basement. This home was already a duplex, though it was in rough shape and it was not a legal duplex. And it was located in the Facer neighborhood, which is not an amazing neighborhood, but it's definitely not a terrible neighborhood either. The curb appeal of this property was really not that great. It looked like a box from the outside, and there was nothing really special about it. It was really dated inside and it needed a ton of work. Now, the wonderful property was in a prime area of North End St. Catharines. It was in a family-friendly street, a real premium area. The property itself was one of the nicer renovated homes that I've ever seen. The upper level was turnkey with nothing to do. It was a 3-bedroom with about 1,100 square feet of living space, and the basement was a finished basement, but it would need some work in order to create a legal second suite. It also came with a spacious backyard that was pretty much as nice as it comes when it comes to looking for homes in St. Catharines. That home at that time was listed for $400,000. Now, I ended up purchasing the ugly property for $272,000, and I ended up spending $130,000 in renovations. The renovations ended up taking over a year and 3 months to finish, and because the entire home needed to be renovated, it was vacant this entire time. The renovations for the wonderful property would have been probably done in maybe 3 to 6 months, and I could have actually rented out the main floor while I was working on the basement to get some rental income to offset the monthly carrying cost. Ultimately, both properties at these purchase prices would have created positive cash flow, maybe a little bit less on the premium property. In hindsight, this was the biggest mistake that I feel I made in my real estate investing. Not that the property we bought was such a terrible property, it actually created some equity for us and it creates monthly cash flow. The opportunity cost of not buying the nicer property is very significant, both in terms of appreciation, but also the time and stress that we had to deal with on the ugly property. So here are the top 3 reasons why you should avoid ugly properties. First, ugly properties come with unpleasant surprises. When we opened up the ceiling of the ugly property during the renovation, we found that the ceiling joists holding up the flat roof were actually 2x4s. That is nowhere close to being structurally sound. And this was an additional cost that came up during the renovation that we had to spend, and we would not even have found this out if we didn't do a major renovation and open up the ceiling. Rarely do you find pleasant surprises with ugly homes. Rather, every time you open up walls, you find more problems to deal with. Things like structural walls that are not properly supported, basements where water comes in during a rainy day, old electrical and plumbing that may remain in hard to reach areas that even if they say it's been redone, it hasn't fully been redone. I've heard many times from investors who own ugly properties that they would rather not open up walls in their homes because they are sure to find more problems to fix, and honestly, they would rather ignore it. Second, ugly properties can't attract and keep great tenants. Even if the cash flow numbers you calculate on paper are much better than a wonderful property, what you will find is that your tenant profile can be very challenging if you're in a rough area, especially if you're charging a lower rent. Even if you find a great tenant, they will likely want to move to a nice neighborhood, so don't expect them to stay for long. The vacancy as well as the time and energy it takes to find new tenants are a real factor to consider. While my property in St. Catharines is not in a terrible area and it is fully renovated, I've still had to find new tenants for both units multiple times. Rarely do I have a tenant stay for longer than a year. If you own a property in a truly rough neighborhood, expect this to be significantly worse. Third, any renovation you do on an ugly property will end up being lipstick on a pig. No matter how much money you invest into renovating the property, the home will still be an ugly property because its location and the bones of the property cannot be changed. As a result, your efforts to improve the property are much better spent on a wonderful property that may be just dated but with good bones. In conclusion, a cheap property is not necessarily a great investment. Consider carefully the quality of the property, the tenant profile you can attract, and the location before making an investment decision. What are your thoughts on buying a wonderful property versus an ugly property? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're interested in investing in the Niagara region, there's a link in the description below if you'd like to book a complimentary consultation with one of the investment coaches from my real estate team. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more investing content.